I'm Jen Newton, the registered dietitian at the Skylakes Wellness Center. We're back in the kitchen today, and I want to walk you through making whole wheat scones. I chose this because we are always, or should be, looking for ways that we can incorporate more whole grains into our lifestyle, and I think this is an easy way to demonstrate how easy it is to work with, and scones is something that is a lot easier for us to make than I think many people realize, so I thought it was a great example. So why choose whole grains over more of the refined grains? So like, why choose whole wheat flour over all-purpose flour? Well, one of the biggest differences between whole wheat flour and the all-purpose flour is the whole wheat flour has been a lot less processed, and that allows it to retain a lot of the major nutrients that the wheat kernel contains, including the fiber, versus the all-purpose flour has been highly processed and thus has had many of the nutrients taken away, including and especially the fiber content. The whole wheat flour does add a nutty flavor to whatever product that you're using it in, which I think is actually a good thing in a lot of circumstances, but definitely something you need to be aware of. It also can create a more dense product because of the amount of protein that it contains compared to all-purpose flour. So with that in mind, a couple things that I want to encourage you to think about as you're starting out, maybe on your own adventure using more whole grains, is to one, maybe start by using a recipe that's been developed using whole wheat flour. That way you know it's been tried, tested, and is true, so you're going to be able to have a good outcome or good product when you're finished. If you choose to try to do some substitutions on your own from an existing recipe, it's absolutely possible, but I would suggest starting slowly. Because of the differences between the whole wheat flour and the all-purpose flour, I would suggest starting with just a 25 to 50% substitution, meaning that if your recipe is calling for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, that you start with just half a cup or 1 cup of the whole wheat flour and using the rest of it still at all-purpose. Give it a couple tries, and figure out if the end product is acceptable. There may need to be other changes in the recipes that you will need to do to make it a product that you and your family will enjoy. Now, as I said, we're going to be doing whole wheat scones today, and I'm using a recipe that was developed specifically using whole wheat flour. If you don't know what a scone is more closely resembles a pastry than it does bread because it doesn't use yeast as a leavening agent. We're going to be using baking powder as our leavening agent here. And while it can be eaten any time of the day, a little bit of trivia with scones, these originally came as an afternoon tradition to be eaten with afternoon tea. So I think that's kind of a little novelty. But what we're going to be doing today are cranberry almond whole wheat scones. So we'll get things ready to go, and then I'll show you how everything fits together. I have all of our dry ingredients added in here. We added our whole wheat flour, our baking powder that we're using as our leavening agent. We've got a little bit of salt and some sugar to go along with it as well, just for a little bit of a sweetener. But these aren't terribly sweet. If you're familiar with scones, they're not terribly sweet, but just a little bit to it. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to add my butter. So an easy way that I find to do this is to actually use a stick of frozen butter and to grate it to allow it to be more evenly incorporated into our mixture here without me having to get my hands dirty by doing it by hand. And just to kind of show you what this will look like, I'm literally just using a basic box grater here, and it comes out with these nice small pieces that really make it easy to incorporate them uniformly into our dry mixture. So I'm going to finish grating this entire stick of butter. The recipe does call for half a cup, and get that added in here, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the next step. I've added my grated butter into my flour mixture, and I'm just going to gently incorporate that in here just to make sure it's all evenly distributed. And then as I have that done, I'm going to add in my mixture, my additives, if you will. We're doing cranberry almonds, so I've got some dried cranberries and some sliced almonds as well. If you wanted to toast your almond slices first, that could also lend just a really nice flavor to it. I'm just going to gently incorporate these in here. And then my last step is going to be to add in the milk, which is going to be used to just bring everything together. So this is 1 cup, and the recipe calls for 3/4 to 1 cup. I suggest starting with about 3/4 of this, or 3/4 of a cup, and mixing it together, and then only add in as much as you need to really have it come together to be a cohesive dough. So I'm going to start with that and just mix it together. You see it start kind of coming together in a dough form. And that's another another difference between all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour. Generally, the whole wheat flour will take a little bit more liquid to bring it together than will the all-purpose flour. All right, so as you can see, it's starting to come together as a dough, but it's not entirely there, so I'm going to add a little bit more liquid to it, and I'm going to keep doing that until it starts coming together. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what we end up with. Okay, so I continue to add just a little bit of liquid until my dough really came together. I probably used just over 3/4 of a cup, but they still have quite a bit left here. So just use, again, as much as you need to. From here, what we're gonna do is knead it just a few times in the bowl, and then I'm gonna turn it out onto a floured surface here so that we can roll this out and get it ready to go into the oven. And so we literally just wanna make sure that we're not handling the dough too much, so that we're just making sure things are all incorporated in together. And it looks like we're pretty good to go here. So I'm going to toss this onto my floured surface. I'm gonna add a little bit of extra dough to it and get started with my rolling pin. Move things out of the way so we don't break them down. So at this point, you can roll it out to any shape that you want. If you prefer, we're looking at about a 1/2 inch thick dough. You can use then cookie cutters or like a biscuit cutter if you just want round scones. I personally prefer that kind of the haphazard look with them, so I'm going to use a pie cutter or a pizza cutter after I get this rolled out into more of a circle and have it more kind of scone triangles. So I've lined my pan with a piece of parchment paper, not because it's necessary, but again, just for that ease of cleanup that I like. And now what I'm doing is just putting them on the cooking sheet. My oven's been preheated to 450. If you're not using the parchment paper, it's an ungreased baking sheet, so there's nothing else that you need to do to it. From here, I'm gonna stick it in the oven, and we're gonna bake it for about 13 to 15 minutes until they just start turning golden brown. One thing that I love about this dough, without the additions of the almonds and the cranberries, you can actually use this for toppings for things like a pot pie, for example, or use it as kind of a base to make dumplings, sort of. Something like dumplings in soups or stews. So it's a real versatile and very easy dough to put together. So I'm going to stick this in the oven, and then we'll see what we have when these are done baking. So we baked these at 450 degrees. It ended up being for about 15 minutes. And what I was looking for is that just nice turning of that golden brown, as you can see on the top of these. And if you turn, you see the bottom of them, there's also just a nice golden brown color there as well. So we put them on a cooling rack to cool, and then we can eat right away. And these also will store for several days if you keep them in a covered container in the refrigerator or on the countertop. These are going to be delicious. I encourage you to give them a try and tell us what you think.